Oh, no, go the other way.
Is it okay? Okay.
I'm trying to close my window.
Jesus Christ.
Tell me, like, what is First Dance and what is it about?
Okay, so First Dance essentially a letter to a time in my life where, first of all, I realized that I wanted to start making films a long, long time ago, but didn't really know how or what to do, and had a lot of like negative self-talk around it. So it didn't happen for many years. But it's also like this, for me, it was also like, it was also the process of like figuring out my like creative voice in a way, and like learning, like giving myself permission to tell stories the way that I wanted to tell stories. So it's the first of, you know, many projects that was specifically that in the context of like narrative film. So the inspiration for it came a long time ago when I lived in LA as a wee young lass, not as a kid, but like young adult. And or I was a teenager. I don't know. I was pretty young. I had moved there. I was trying to live on my own for the first time. And there was this album that had come out a few years before called Dead Man's Bones by Ryan Gosling and Zach Fields or Shields. I can never remember this guy's name. So bad. But anyways, it's this album that they made, and it's like super spooky. It's got this very like, I don't even know how to explain it. You just have to listen to it. But there's a song on it called My Body's a Zombie for You. And it felt emblematic of like the drama that I was experiencing at the time in a really like tumultuous relationship. And I wasn't really sure how to process it. And I was like living alone in LA and really struggling, trying to be an actor. And I started writing this script then, and it kind of just sat and existed. And I would like look at it every October and be like, one day, for years and years and years. And then finally early last year, I was like, or I guess it was in like November, December of 2021. I was like, this is stupid. Like, just finish the damn script. There's no reason not to. And so it was like that moment was like the flip switched. And then I wrote it in like a month, finished it really quickly. And then for me, that was quickly after it had sat for years and years and years. A month felt like no time at all. And and then from there, it kind of like I just made the commitment that I was going to do it. And then everything kind of just started happening. It wasn't easy necessarily, but things started rolling because I was like very much in the mindset, like this film will be made by the end of the year. I don't know how, had no idea how I was going to do it. I'd never made that kind of a film before. I've made lots and lots of dance films. But this just felt different and so much bigger in so many ways. So it was really like, it felt experimental to me at first, and then it started to feel like a real thing that I was really proud of once we were in the middle of making it. But I think my biggest obstacle in the beginning was just getting it done, and then like committing 100% to the fact that it was going to get done and trusting that like things would coalesce, which they did.
So like what was the thing in your head that kept you from writing it? Like, what was the mental block?
It just, it felt like I wasn't a filmmaker. So I was like, what business do I have writing a film? Like, I'm in them, but I don't write them. I don't even know how to write them. I think I will be totally honest. I think the biggest thing, like the real biggest thing, was formatting. I was like, I don't know how to format a script. And that's a stupid reason. I mean, it's a real reason that a lot of people have communicated with me too, that they struggle with. But like, I was literally like, I don't know how to make it look like this character says this and that character says that, and here's the action and here's the thing and that. Like, I just didn't it, but that was like a silly excuse. That was really a deeper root. The root of that was like, I don't feel like qualified to do this. So I put this like, oh, I don't know how to format a script, so I guess I'll never write. Like, it's a stupid, like.
What at the time was like a filmmaker to you? Because you were an actor, so like you were on set, like doing things. You were around people who were working in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I've been an actress since I was 6 years old. Like working, mostly theater back then, but like, I've been working in film since I was 16. And So I'm no stranger to set. Like I've been on big sets, I've been on small sets, I've been on indie sets, I've been on union sets. Like I've, or not the Indian union can't be the same thing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like I've been on commercial sets, I've been on, like, so I don't know why that world felt so far away, but I think it is because I started acting so young. And also because I'm a woman, I think a lot of the times people put you like as talent, you go over there, and everybody that's like working is over here. And I think there's like this is something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, and since First Dance happened, I think people really see them as separate jobs. Like, and I mean that like, obviously an actor is not holding a C-stand. Like, I get it. Like, they are different jobs on set, but I think people value them differently. And then there's stigmas about each. So I think I've experienced a lot of like frustrations from crew towards actors, offhanded remarks, snarky comments. And I've also known a lot of actors that have no idea what the crew is even doing. And I think I was one of those people where I was like, I appreciate all of you, and I don't even know what your jobs actually entail, because there was no way for me to get that information on set that wasn't disruptive. And like, you know what I mean? Like I could have been like, I'm the kind of person that's like, I don't know what that is. What are you doing? Like I don't feel weird about asking that necessarily. And I've always been that way. I was especially that way even more when I was younger, like a kid. But I was just never really in sets or on sets or in experiences, like environments where that was like encouraged or welcome. And sometimes it was like frowned upon. Like I've been told like real actors don't ask those questions, and I'm like, well, real people don't make comments like that to their peers on set. I don't know. What is that? So I think I realized I had to unpack that I had a lot of experiences like that where I didn't necessarily feel like I was in a space where you could do that. And on commercial sets, like you just kind of don't, like you can, I mean, like when people are on lunch or whatever, but you definitely see the like separation, the segregation happens, like all the extras sit together and all the like, featured talent end up kind of, and it makes sense. I get it, especially when you're building relationships that are going to have to translate to screen, and like you're investing in that. But it just seemed like there were so many moments where I was like, I wish I had the opportunity to learn more about you and what you're doing. But like, first of all, you're working and I'm working and we're both focused. And secondly, like the culture of this is not to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's actually really funny because I was thinking about this in the shower this morning about how like I didn't even know what a short was by the time I had made my feature. And in the middle of making my feature, I was like sitting there and I was like, oh my gosh, I have made 7 shorts. Like I
You're
just
like,
did not, I like
funny.
did not know. And I was like, wow, I've directed 7 shorts. And I like looked at my friend and I was like, I'm directing, like I'm a director. And he looked at me and was like, yeah.
That's cute.
But like I had this like mental block in my head of like I didn't realize that I had written a script because it wasn't formatted, like it was formatted as a script, but I didn't know it wasn't like quite the proper formatting.
Sure.
And I didn't know that it was a script.
Yeah,
I like
that's funny.
I just did not know. And anytime I asked people questions, I'd be like, "Oh, how do you do that?" They would like kind of be rude or scoff or be weird because I was always an actor on set.
Right.
But being like, like autistic, being like, I can do that better, kind of like protected me in some way because I always just like strong armed my way through something,
Yeah.
And you kind of have to do that. Like you kind of have to be like, I can hold a C stand. Well, like why is this a big deal? you know?
Yeah.
Otherwise people like lean on the form, I think, of like set etiquette is important, but people lean on the form of old Hollywood, and movies just aren't made that way anymore. Like a lot of actors like blend into the crew, a lot of crew, like don't even know what actors go through. And I've noticed like the people who act like that and are people who don't understand what the other side ghoster,
Totally.
like they've
Yeah.
never acted or they've never been crew,
Yeah.
you know, because both are just as hard and have such an important place in the making of the movie. You can't make one without either one, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's very interesting. Yeah. I the only way that I knew how to format a script correctly, and this is actually really funny, and this is why I was thinking about it, was because I had a friend named Meg, and I was like, I really want to write this like web series for us. It'll be like girls and Sex in the City and be kind of funny. And she was like, oh, like that sounds like it'd be a good TV show. And she sat me down and taught me how to write a script. She was like,
Mm.
this is what you go interior, exterior, you know,
Right.
you have
Right.
the title. She did the whole form. And then I sat down and wrote my first feature in the course of a weekend because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Why?
Mhm.
Why
Yeah.
like it's like the easiest thing. And I wrote it down and like then much later I had people read the script and people were like, "Oh no, that's not how you write a script. That's how you write a screenplay." And then I rewrote the script and then they were like, "Oh, that's not how you write a script. That's how you do this." Like how you do a shooting script. And then I started reading other people's scripts. I started
Right.
reading Sofia Coppola's scripts, you know, just pulling up scripts to like get a good feel of like what other writers were like, and they're all different.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they look all different, like every single one of them.
Yeah.
So funny.
There's not really rules. It's just so silly. Like I get so like, okay, when people are like, it's not supposed to be like that, or it's supposed to be like this. And I'm like, you don't even know. Like you're just guessing just as much as anybody is. Like, you know, like
Yeah, like
you,
nobody knows, but they're all pretending.
yeah, totally. Yeah. I read the Princess Bride, one of the dance companies that I'm in, Boxana. We work at the Ren Fair in the summer, and in the evenings we do like dramatic readings of scripts, but like we all play the characters and like, um, it's really funny. Like it's so great. We did Lord of the Rings the first weekend of the fair and then continued it because it's like a million pages long. Of course, the first Lord of the Rings, all of Lord of the Rings. But then the third weekend, we needed a gear shift. So we did Princess Bride. And reading that script's hilarious. That script
Mm,
is like, it reads like a stand-up routine in some parts of it. It's like, it's funny. Like the action is funny. Like it's irreverent and it's super lighthearted and it doesn't take itself. It's just like the film, you know, like how the film came across. Like, and I've never read the book, but the screenplay was hysterical. We were like, who does this? Like, I was like, I'm inspired because this is what's going on in my head, especially if I'm writing comedy. But people are always like, you
mhm.
can't like write it like that because there's like, that's going to get conveyed in the action. And I'm like, but the actors are still not in my head. They need to get the information somehow, you know? So it's
Yeah,
just funny because I'm like, well, you can't tell me that after reading that script that there's like, that breaks all the rules that I've ever been told are rules, you know?
yeah. For
And it
me,
was
what I've been
great.
told is like style. Like
Hmm.
the style in which you write the script is how people are going to intake the information.
Right.
And once you realize that style is like basically whatever you want,
Yeah.
especially in terms of writing,
Right.
um, because like, you know, we've written scripts together where like I write more like poetry, you know? I'll be like, this happened, like it's a little more rhythmic. And I like stuff like that. I
Mm.
like it being a little more like a screenplay, and I just stopped listening to people. It's just like, you're wrong. Well, tell me a little bit about how like what the story was about and like what did it mean to you?
Yeah. The story was about, so the song that kind of inspired it, it only inspired it in tone, really. I realized later on, I was like, I've just made up this story that I assumed was the story of the song. I have no basis for that information at all. I've never talked to Ryan Gosling. So I don't know, but and the music that I referenced earlier was written for, I think, a horror film that they were trying to make, but then it never got made. But the story itself was kind of so it's basically the story of this like couple, and the world is like, you know, like dealing with this crazy outbreak, so to speak, and they basically have to decide whether or not they want to like what they want to do about that. They want to get married, um but it's like a choice. They have to make a choice whether or not they want to deal with the potential repercussions and the potential dangers of doing that based on this very specific threat. So, and then they do, and then they have to deal with the consequences of that. So it was a little bit of a metaphor for like my life being a multi-ethnic woman, and whatever relationship I'll ever be in is always going to be a mixed race, for lack of a better term, relationship. And there's an amount of like consideration that goes into that, where you have to go like, is this worth the turmoil that we're both going to be put through because we look different from each other? Like I realized at some point in my life that there's no one person that I can be with that like is not going to cause a problem for part of their family, or somebody's going to reveal their racism at some point, or like weird bigotry from Uncle Joe or whatever at some stupid Thanksgiving, whatever, like it always comes up, and like people reveal to you their insecurities about it, whether or not you're inviting it, because you're just existing together in the world. And it's really complicated, and it's way more complicated than people want to talk about. And it's very real, and it's very present. It's more so in some people's lives than others, depending on how they present. So I wanted to make something that was like a really beautiful picture of that, and like was really effective at conveying that without shoehorning or like spoon feeding the audience that information. So this idea that like, the world makes things harder for you than the thing being hard. That's what I always say about parenting. I'm like, I love being a parent, but the world makes it hard. It's not, I'm like, I'm always like, it's not this between me and her that's hard, really. Like it is, but it's not the kind of hard that's insurmountable. It's like the world puts shit on you that is not yours. And that is sad and sucky. And I felt like I wanted to make a film about that, and that was kind of the inspiration for it. And I feel like that came through, and like there's this idea that like the like life can make you dark, or can make you a monster, it can make you feel like that even if you're not, like deep down. And so I wanted to make something that felt like it transported you to a different time and a different place, where like you could experience it in a vacuum because of like the vibe and the feeling of it. And so it's a story. It's like in its heart, it's like a love story, but it's really a story about like, what is the price of that if you are the wrong people according to the rest of the world.
Yeah, definitely. I found it interesting too that you chose to do the 60s because as like, kind of the main era that they're in. It's kind of like 60s light,
Yeah.
but because the 60s is to me the most fascinating time in history, the 60s in America, because it is rife with like racism and sexism and people doing terrible things behind closed doors. And yet people intensely romanticize the 60s.
Right.
Exactly. And I loved that. And I loved the idea that the guy isn't the monster, which is most classically done.
Right.
That she is the monster. And like the dynamic between them of her going, you have to leave. I'm like trying to save you from myself. And then him trying to pull her in and being like, no, I love you. I'm going to stay even if I'm going to get hurt, which is this push and pull in a relationship, especially when you are, multiracial.
Right.
It's this constant problem. And like, it's interesting to me too, because like if you were to ever expand it into a feature, you could really like delve deep into something like that,
Yeah.
Like I have these conversations all the time with my partner John, who's like a tall white guy, and how like sometimes he doesn't like understand things that are going on that are incredibly hard for me being an Asian Mexican woman.
Yeah.
And like we have this little like push and pull of like, he's like, I love you, everything's gonna be great. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Things aren't like, not everything's gonna be great. Like you don't get it.
It's hard to like find ways to communicate that. I think people have to be really, really like secure with them in themselves and be prepared to be wrong a lot, because I think that's part of it, is like, especially, in my experience with like being with like white, or at least white passing men, is like they're often just wrong because they do not know what's going on. And that's hard for a lot of dudes. It's like really hard. Like, I don't like being wrong either, but I can be like, maybe there's something going on here that I don't actually know. You know, like that's not a far step after me being like, what? Like, and I feel like for them, it's like it's like a ravine. It's like a huge, like a cavern. It's like jumping across the Grand Canyon. Sometimes that cognitive leap to be like, oh, maybe I don't have any idea, and maybe I will never know. How do I be with that knowledge? Like, how do I sit with that and know, and like, who am I in that space? Because you can't fix it, which a lot of, people want to do. They want to fix it, which is a good heart, noble hearted thing to want to do. But if you cannot, then like, what do you become in that space where you're not able to affect change in the way that you think you're supposed to? That's tough for people, and like, and so I wanted to like highlight that too, but the way that I did it was not like there was, there's like a struggle between them, and there's like the conversation that's towards the end of the film, and he's just the thing that I think I wish for all the time is like, accept that you cannot change what you cannot change, and just be who you are in that. Let me see who you are in that space, and then like, then we can really like be together. You know what I mean? Because it's like the constant like reaching for, I'm like, you can't change this, and they're like, yeah, I can, and I'm like, you really can't, like, but you can help by being with me in that uncomfortable space, and like staying by me, like if you know that that's going to suck for me or suck for you, and like we just deal with it together, and we're like as a united front. But if you're over here trying to insist that it isn't that way, or like, I don't know, it's complicated. That's like more relationship complicated stuff. But like Gabriel is really the kind of guy that's just like, I can look at things and like I can have an opinion about things, and I can also accept information, and I can accept that I'm wrong, and like that doesn't change what I want. But I'm not delusional about the fact that I cannot affect this thing this way, because it's not for me to understand anyway. It's just for me to hold space for this person that's going through it, which is what he ends up doing.
Definitely, because it's like a funny a funny like small version of this was like, me and John were like on a boat, like we were on a pontoon boat with this group of people. They're like business contacts, and one of the wives of the group of people was like saying some uncomfy stuff, like just like, I just did not like this woman. And at one point John said that I was, and mind you, I'm the only I'm the only person on this boat that's not white. Okay.
Yeah.
And at one point John goes, oh yeah, like she's Asian or whatever, because they asked, and she asked me to do a Chinese accent. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, because first off, I'm not Chinese.
I'm not Chinese, dummy. Like, what?
I was like, I'm Taiwanese. And I'm not going to like do my grandma's accent. That's weird. And she kept pressing me for it. And she had this look on her face that was like mean, pressing me for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Ew.
And
you should have just pushed her off.
Yeah, I thought about it.
You're like,
I was like looking
big
at
it
her
overboard. Like, somebody go get your girl.
And like later on, we actually brought this up the other day, because we were like talking about it, and he was like, yeah, he's like, we should go back on that pontoon boat. And I was like, absolutely not. That woman was pressing me to do a Chinese accent. Like, that's
so inappropriate.
Super. Yeah, it's like not even quite nuanced, but it, like, for him it is. And for some reason I started thinking about First Dance, and I started thinking about the fact that like, the character in First Dance, like Gabriel, like, yes, the story is in this, this fantasy kind of sci-fi world, and the stakes are life and death, and he's like, I'll just die with you. You know what I mean? He's just like, I love you, I'll just die with you. But like, I think in some ways, in smaller stakes, it does feel like life and death.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. You just want your man to be like,
I'll die with you here on this stupid boat.
I'll die with you.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Because it like speaks to that. And it's like, like, I think people could read it as like melodramatic a little bit, but you're right. Like it does feel life and death because when you're in that moment and you're with your peers and your partner looks different from you and they're putting her in a bad spot or that whatever,
You
right?
instantly feel unsafe. Like I instantly felt
Yeah,
incredibly unsafe and uncomfortable.
because that is the same mentality that causes much bigger problems than just people talking shit to you on a boat, right? It doesn't,
Yeah.
there's no way to trust or know where the lines get blurred. Like
Yeah.
and people cross, like they cross a line, and once they're in unsafe territory, they've made themselves known as somebody who's unsafe, even in this very like seemingly docile, seemingly like harmless, ignorant, oh, she just doesn't know kind of way. How far does that go? Like, do I want to sit here and find out how far the ignorance goes? Do I need
Hmm.
to? Like, do I need to sacrifice myself to figure out how far like people will go because they want to be entertained by the ethnic person on the boat? No, like no, that's how bad things happen, and they do happen, So it's
Though,
like,
you know what I
die
did
with
say to
me
her?
on this freaking boat, bro. Like,
Die with me. Come on. I know. I did look at her though, and I went, "Do you not know that Taiwan and China are two different places?"
probably didn't,
I looked at
honestly.
her, I was like, "They're not the same thing.
You should look at a map.
They're
Why don't you
not the
Google
same."
it,
Why don't you Google it?
Karen?
Yeah. So then, that's interesting. So then, like, okay, so you finish this story, right?
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, I have all these things to say. What do I do next? How do I do it? What, what, how did you assemble your team? Because, like, you were like, I've only acted, I haven't done anything behind the scenes in film. How did you do it?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I have at that point, I had directed, filmed, been in, and like edited, I think 20, well, no, at the beginning of 2022, it was 18 dance films
Oh, yeah,
with
you had done all
us.
those dance films.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and that was just since the pandemic. So I've done many before that, like many, but um that was helpful, like bolstered me a little bit. In my mind, they did not apply, like didn't cross over. I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then at some point somebody was like, didn't you just direct like a grip of dance films? And I was like, yeah, but it's dance films. And they were like, they were films, right? And I was just like, yeah, but they were, oh. And like, and it took me a minute to be like, okay, Bevin, so you need people and you need stuff and things, and then you need to film it. And that's how things work. Like, don't overblow it. Like, don't blow it. Like, don't freak out about it. And then I was like, right. I can do this. So the first thing I did, I was like, I need to educate myself about different roles specifically on set. Like, per our earlier conversation, I didn't feel like I was educated enough about everybody, like everybody's job. And I was like, going into this, the only way that I feel like I can bring people on, um, people that I haven't known for years and years and years, and I need to trust that they're gonna like see my vision, but also I need to be in a position where I can ask for things from an educated place, right?
Hmm.
Like, so that I know if something is just impossible and it can't be shot that way, or I know if, like, like I need to know what I want and what I want, if what I want is doable or not. And I want to know that information myself before I start
Hmm.
asking other people, because other people's biases and opinions and thoughts and ideas are all going to get caught up in the mix, which is fine, and that's part of the process. But like, I need to be firm on what I want, and I want to know that it's solid, like that I'm solid about how to execute to the best of my ability. And not for an ego reason, just because I like to see different people's ideas. I'm like, that's a cool idea, I didn't think about that. I get excited about the collaborative process, but what can happen is like you get swept away in that sometimes. And then a lot of the times I'm like, that project does not look how I thought it was going to look at all, and I have feelings about it, and I can unpack that later. But right now I need to just finish the project,
Hmm.
like, and like, that's not a bad thing. But I was like, this is a message that's very personal. So I just need to be clear about how I execute. And I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with me as much as possible. So I asked a DP that I had just recently worked with, Damien, who ended up being the DP for the shoot. I was like, hey, can I just call you and ask you a bunch of questions? Because in my mind, I saw him working on like Tavern Brawl, and I didn't know what his history was at all. But I was like, you're clearly in these places doing a lot of stuff. So I called him and I was like, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and like, you can just tell me whatever you want to tell me. I'm just like trying to get information. So I called him. I talked with somebody else he had recommended to me. And both these people are great. They're very young. So I've been acting much, 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 much longer than than the people I originally talked to had been involved in film. But it was still helpful for me to get their perspective because they were actively working in film, like right at that moment.
Yeah.
And that was the information I needed. Like, what's the picture of Portland film right now? Like, what am I walking into?
Mm-hmm.
And then you were on my radar, but we hadn't worked together at all yet, at all. And like, I don't even remember when we started talking. I think we were like connected on social media at that point. So this was the very beginning of last year. This was like February of last year, 2022. And I know that I was like, you were in my sphere because I would see your stuff and like your stuff. And like, so I knew that we were interacting, but like, I don't remember exactly what our
I
relationship was yet. Cause
We didn't really like have one because like
yeah,
we had that one instance on Tavern Brawl where we like kind of like rubbed each other the wrong way, and then we worked together on that commercial.
yeah, but this was months after that, or this was months before that. So
Oh,
like,
really? I
yeah, this
can't
was
even
like
remember.
3 months before that. Cause that was June. Because I remember because the Tenacious D concert was that night. And then the day before I had tested for my second degree black belt and then went to Halsey afterwards and my knuckles were bleeding because I broke bricks and stuff. It's a very vivid
You were
weekend.
like,
I was,
and then I called Megan and I was like, Megan,
yeah,
yo, what's up?
yeah,
She
basically.
like
Well,
knuckles bleeding. Hello.
I'm like, hello, Megan. Squeep, squeep. No, I remember reaching out to you after that point because we had the meeting, the production meeting that I was part of for that commercial thing where you and John were there. And then we ended up working on the commercial. So rewind back, I was asking other people in the film world just like to take 5 minutes and just tell me what they do and what that means basically to them and how that works for them. But then fast forward to the summertime, we worked on that commercial in June and I was just like, dang, Megan's great. Like I really enjoyed working with her. She really like is a clear. And then I started looking at your work and like, other people were like, oh yeah, Megan's awesome. Megan's awesome. And I was just like, all right, maybe she forgot that I accidentally threw her through a door. I'm just going to ask her about the film, and then I reached out to you and, that was great. That was the right thing to do. And it worked out. And I wasn't expecting anything, and at that point, Damien was like, who do you want to work on this? And I was just like, I kind of already had you like in my mind. This was after we had initially talked. And I was like, it would be great. I think in my mind, I needed somebody that, I could get the vision and understood the vibe of it or whatever. And you definitely seemed to, just based on just on me explaining it. And so those were the things that felt the most important to me, that I wanted to learn the most about their roles right away. I knew what a director did, but I wanted to hear other people's ideas about what that meant, because I can think something all day and have my experiences all day, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one doing it. Therefore, I need to know how other people feel about what that job means to them, what that responsibility means to them, what that workload actually means, like from a logistic level, how that actually works for them in their mind. So that was my process, was like, I needed to get educated. And that was for me, that felt the most reasonable forward step, without knowing where the money was going to come from yet, without knowing who else I would use to crew it, because I wasn't really connected to crew people. So I reached out to you guys, and you two, in my mind, were well connected enough that I could rely on your word. If you were like, hire this person, they're going to be great. Because I was like, basically, that's what I'm going to have to do. Like, so I used the DP and the director as my anchor points, you guys, as my anchor points for like guiding me through the rest of the process of crewing up. Because most of the crew was per your recommendation, and it all ended up being great, so that was
Yeah, I think
like,
I just like because like when you sent me the script and like we started talking about it, I was like, okay, like this is gonna be easy.
yeah,
But I always think everything's gonna be easy. I'm like,
yeah,
that'll be easy. Like I
yeah,
don't know why people are freaking out.
yeah.
Um and yeah, like the crew just kind of, I can't even remember how we brought most of the crew on. I just was to be honest with you, like for a lot of things, I let you guide stuff. Not let
Mm-hmm.
you. I was just like along for the ride
Yeah.
because it was your project and I was just coming on to like co-direct and kind of like facilitate things.
Yeah.
And so like in terms of like bringing crew on and stuff, I kept it really simple to people I really trusted.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else was like your people. It was kind of like half your people, half my people. They all came together and it
Yeah.
was a
Well,
nice little
yeah.
project.
The one of the, I mean, the only person that I had any previous work relationship with at all on that set was Elise. And so a
Yeah,
few of
she
the
was
other
great.
people, yeah, I mean, Elise is amazing. She's just like, she's so on it. And she's super experienced with producing. Like she's extremely, like, so not film, but like she came in knowing like how to stay in her lane and how to reach out. And also as my friend, like emotionally, how are you doing? Which was really
Yeah.
helpful, of course, and like actually necessary. And it was nice to have her there too, because definitely Genevieve, the like main character, like at least was one of the people in my head that personality wise was like an influence for an inspiration for the character. So it was cool. It felt kind of full circle to have her there anyway. Um but yeah, that for me, I was like, I understand the importance of the crew, and I'm gonna have to really rely on trust right now to like get through the process, because I didn't know most of those people. I had never met before. A couple of them I had worked with, a couple, and then all of most of them I was like, well, let's see how this goes. And I think overall, I mean, I feel like for me as a first time, like, like this was my first film. I did myself a lot of favors by writing the script so that it happens in one location, by having this cast be super small. There were 4 actors and 2 of them had no lines,
Yeah,
you
and they were
know,
like on set for they were like on
3
screen for
hours.
like a second.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And making it dialogue heavy between me and another actor that I was working a lot with at the time, and even though we did go through the process of auditioning, I think that was the choice that made the most sense for a lot of reasons. And like it ended up working out great. So me now knowing what I know about filmmaking, like, not that I'm some expert, but just being this far in the future, like I'm just like, that was exactly, because there's a lot of like projects that I have that I'm excited about in films like that I'm still writing and stuff, but that was the right project to be my first project because it was
Yeah.
not complicated to shoot, in my opinion. I wasn't holding the camera, but um it felt like we had enough time, except for the like afternoon of the last day, but that was because of prosthetics stuff.
Yeah,
but
honestly, that was totally fine.
yeah.
It's actually funny because you say that, but then when I saw like the script, I was immediately worried
Oh
because
really?
like the filmmaking aspect of it, super duper easy. One
Mm-hmm.
location, same lighting. It literally takes place in like, a couple minutes, but acting wise, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so like reading that, that's why when you called me up and were like, "Hey, like would you want to like can I ask you some questions?" I was like, "Do you want me to direct this? Like do you want me to co-direct this?" Because I had done my own project
Yeah.
and that one was very hard and I did not have a co-director and it
Yeah.
was a personal story and like having to jump between doing a difficult emotional scene and directing
Yeah.
is like just such a whole other ball game and
Yeah.
you end up losing so much and you don't
Yeah.
realize how much you've lost
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so I was
And
like we're gonna do this.
yeah, no, I was really excited about it. And I was like, this is my wheelhouse, is like meaty, like dialogue heavy, emotional, like dynamic stuff to me is the part that I was like, this is okay for me because this is what I do. It was like the filmmaking stuff was just like, I was like, I don't know how to solve that problem. Like, I don't know what that means. If you can't get that shot, we have to change. I was just like, I don't fucking know. I'm going to stand here and act, and then the camera will be around and hopefully capture something, like, so there was so much of that I was like, so it's funny, like our different perspectives of it. Like for me as an actor, I was just like, yeah, like this is great. Like I wrote what I want to be doing because this is the kind of stuff that you don't get to do in commercial stuff. So I miss that because in the recent past, I hadn't been doing as much like deep emotional, like heavily emotional roles. But that's like what all my training is in, and that's what I do. And so I was just like, I'll write something that feels easy for me to access. But producing the film and co-directing it, even with that help, it was really hard to get there sometimes. And also, you know, like one thing about Portland film that I've learned over and over and over again is there is a little bit of a stigma about actors and what actors do on set, because like you'll have a highly emotional scene, and like one of my, like the things that is for me and lots of actors, and we've talked about this, like one of the most disruptive and difficult things to deal with as an actor is when you're in the middle of a highly emotional moment and then they yell cut and everyone reacts. When the crew reacts, like, and not, you know, usually what it is like, Jesus, it's like, it's that thing. And it's like, it really makes it hard because then you're super like the judgment, even if it's not judgment, like it feels you're now emotionally laboring for the people around you, like, which is
Yeah.
really tough to do because you're half like disengaging from the character and like trying to come back to you for a second to take a deep breath if you're not super method, which I don't know if anybody really is in this level of filmmaking. It's like, why?
Yeah.
But I tend to stay in it a little bit longer, and I know the expectation is to snap back to reality immediately after cut, and I don't do that as much because I just don't, because I'm a theater person. My training is in theater, you know, so like
Hmm.
I stay on as you walk into the wing. You need to stay on, you know what I mean? Like you
Hmm.
can't just drop as soon as you pass the line of the curtains. Like it doesn't work that way. But um, like I mean, it doesn't. But so it's funny because it was like I had so many moments on set like that where I was just like, don't worry about me being highly. The scene is emotional. We all know that, right? Like there are
Yeah.
like all these times. So that was probably the most difficult part of shooting, because at some point I was pulling back because of it, or like just making different choices because I was prepared for that after cut moment, you know. Or people being
Yeah.
like, dang, God, wow, you really went there, you know, and you're just like, yeah, because
Because
was
it
I
makes
not
you feel
supposed to?
embarrassed.
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
what
It's,
it does is it makes you feel it makes acting embarrassing. Like
yeah,
when we did our and this has happened many times for me too. I
yeah,
think it's because I think it's a mix of things in Portland. We have amazing actors that are not being given super emotional scenes
yeah.
because Portland is such a place of like horror films, and even though
Mm-hmm.
horror films can be amazing, like generally it's like slasher films or creature films, and people are just like the highest level of acting is them just screaming,
Right,
you know?
right.
And so
Yeah,
when you have to do something emotionally vulnerable, I feel like um the crew not being used to seeing that,
right.
you know, I'm like they do react like that. And we've been on set. Actually, we were on a project together where we did the 48 hour.
Yeah,
And my character is supposed to be afraid. It's like the last moment where she's
Y-
sitting there, she's like, you
yeah.
know, and
Oh
I
my
was like
God.
tearing up, and
Yeah,
everybody had the camera, and I'm sitting there in a room full of people, and everyone looked at me and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like,
yeah. And you're
"Yeah,
like, I'm fine.
I'm
Yeah,
acting."
I was like, why are they doing? Yeah, that made me. I
I'm
really
like,
appreciate
"It's the
everybody.
moment."
Oh my God. I appreciate everybody on that set so much. And there's a lot of people on there that I like, that I would even call friends, you know, that I've worked with many times. But oh my God. I was like, if one more fucking person asks her if she's okay after the
I'm like, "That's the
characters
scene."
just witnessing somebody die or get the shit kicked out of them, like, stop it. You know, it was
Yeah.
making me, that was hard for me because I was like, that's it. That's the thing. It's right there. And that was right before we shot First Dance. So like, part of me was a little like starting to put that together, like, oh, that's the level of like discomfort, because I've been on some sets, and I'd been on a couple of sets earlier in the year where there was like a wildly emotional scene, and it's really intense, and it is like sort of a horror project, but like it's really sad. Like the way it's filmed is just very upsetting. um and people and the crew for the most part was pretty like professional about it. And the director was really careful and really conscientious and chose his language very carefully. And like, so that was cool. So I was like, yeah, that. And then like I had a bunch of other experiences after that. And then like watching you go through that and just being like, okay, like really though, what's my role here and how do I step in because this is ridiculous. And like I saw it start to change your choices and I was just like, like it's
Yeah.
really infuriating. It's so hard to deal with because once you get taken out of it, it's so hard to go back there because it's no longer like a safe space for you to emote. And that is a bummer when you're trying to like do a
Yeah.
nuanced emotional take on something and try things like 99% of what we do is to say half. No, most of what we do is like, you have to be brave enough to try something, and like a lot of the times it's the crazy shit that you try. That's the magic because you're throwing it out the window and just trying something. And like a lot of the times that, that's the magic, the spark is there because you're not thinking anymore. You're just in it. But it's like, it's hard for me to get there when I'm waiting for people on the crew to be like, geez, wow. And you're like,
Well,
wow, what?
it's also
Like,
like when you are directing, producing, you wrote the thing, it's a
yeah,
character out of your mind and you're acting in it. Like people don't, it's such a unique thing that so few people can do
yeah,
that you don't realize the level of rawness you are having in front of other people. Like it's akin to just being like flayed open and
yeah.
you're walking around you're
You're
walking
walking
around with
around
wounds
just so vulnerable.
was so vulnerable and like you saw me on Blacklight,
Yeah.
and like that was like not a difficult scene, but like I was like doing food orders and like telling the DP and the light and the gaffer like you have 2 minutes and I'm like okay everybody get in scene okay action and then I'm like
Yeah.
the character.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think First Dance was actually really good for me because, co-directing with you, um, it was really fun to just be like, okay, I'm just going to protect this person. I'm just going to
Yeah.
facilitate their vision. I don't really have any like personal stake in the vision itself, because I didn't write it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so it was such a joyous experience for me. And, it's funny. I actually have a question for you because me and Jake were talking about this. Jake is like our close friend who's an actor as well, and he had only ever been on sets with me as a director, and he recently got to work on a set where he wasn't working with me as a director, and I wasn't in the room. So he kept looking around like, "Where's Megan?" So, when I work with actors, I'm like 100% in it with them because I just want to act. So I'm like making the faces behind the
Hmm.
screen. I'm feeling the emotion, and then when they finish something, instead of going, "Oh wow, wow, that's very very deep," I'm like, "Wow!" I'm like, "Yeah, you cried like that. That was awesome." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go deeper. Okay, how much pain can we put in this scene?" And I'm like so excited, it's infectious, and they don't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
Um, what was it like working with me as a director? And like, was that for you hard to stay in those emotional scenes? Or like, did it add to it? Did it take away from it?
I think you understood what I wanted so well that I was able to like really let go because I think my goal was and this was hard for me. I knew I was like I had to really really like have a lot of conversations with myself about it going into it because I knew like so specifically what the vision was and what I wanted. And I knew like I was like I've watched the whole film 1,000 times before we even stepped on set. Like
Yeah, just
every
like it's in your
nuanced
mind.
shot, like every little moment. But I lacked the language to communicate all of those things exactly how I want it. But like it's the same like when I write a song and it's fully produced. It's not just an idea. It's not just a hook. It's not just a lyric. It's like the whole thing that you would hear playing on the radio, mixed, mastered down to like the final degree. Like, so I see the big picture with every detail intact. Reverse engineering that is like the hard part and to convey that. And so I feel like I I communicated it well enough because when we got on set, it was easier than I thought it was going to be to let go. of like directorialness, you know, like to just, because I was like, I really need to act, like I have to, or else this is all going to fall apart. Like it really is being carried by just me and Billy, you know, like the whole thing. So because it's about those characters, you know. So like I think like there were moments where you there were times where I was like, I just need to stay sad right now because I got to carry this through. I can't get taken out of it. And you were like, yeah. I was like, oh, Megan, okay. What do you want to tell me? You know, like that I feel like
yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and it was great. So I was like, take the encouragement and like, you know, because like your job as an actor too is like you can't hinge too much on what is going on around you because then you become dependent on praise, and like that's a bad place to be. But like it's also a very normal place to be, and it's like it's not fair to chastise oneself for like sort of feeding off of that in the moment, especially if you're like validating, am I on the right track or am I not? You know, like that is important. But then we as humans, I think, depending on who we are and how we are, take it a step further and like take the validation and like kind of use it as fuel to bolster ourselves to make choices. And like I think that's dangerous because it really should come from within, right? Because that's the only thing that nobody can touch is like what's happening inside of you. Is you're not dependent on somebody else. You're not dependent on feedback that you may or may not get, because there's a lot of times you're working with directors that are totally not there for you, and they will just leave you lying on the floor crying and then tell you did a bad job or you missed a line. And you know, like, and you're like, if you could just communicate that to me in a different way, I wouldn't fall apart right now. But now I'm really sad for real, you know, and it's like not a good scene. And I've definitely worked with directors like that where they're just like, you need to cry prettier even though you're about to commit suicide. You like, and you're just like, what does that mean? You know, like not helpful or giving you line throughs, which whatever. But it was great working with you on First Dance because I felt like you did get the vision so much and you were so respectful of how personal it was to me without needing it to be personal to you too. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't get how to let that live. Like, okay, this person is having like this is their baby and I'm just here to like carry it with them, and I'm going to do the best that I can carrying it with them. But I recognize that I didn't birth this child, so I don't have the same emotional connection to it, but I can be just as invested in my way and also hold space for them while they're experiencing all the things they're experiencing, for, you know, in my case being the writer and producing it and blah, 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 you know. So that was something that I felt like was really great. And you told me about the way we speak, and you had shared some of your experience with that with me. And for me, I was like, wow, that's powerful. Like she gets what it feels like to be lying on the floor naked in a way, literally, in your case, literally, you know, like trying to guide something and not having the support, you know, and that
Quiet
sounds,
Crowd.
or
Oh my
quiet
gosh.
crowd. I mean,
Yeah,
not the way we speak, quiet crowd. Yeah.
that
Sorry.
was that was another film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. I
no,
know.
I had to direct like naked, covered in paint, and
Yeah.
I literally couldn't leave the canvas I was on.
Mm-hmm.
So like I had like a square and
Yeah.
everybody was like eating lunch around me and I'm like
Yeah.
she's like, okay, what's the next scene? Like
Yeah. And for me, you told me about that specific experience, and I was like, yeah, like she literally did that, and that's like how it feels inside, you know, like you're just
yeah,
like,
it is.
so I was like, wow, what a powerful experience for her to have. And also like kind of bummed that there wasn't more like support for you there. I don't love that. But like as a friend, I'm like, I don't like that for you. I don't love that for you. But like, I feel, I was like, yeah, she gets it. Like she, you know, like she understands the level of like vulnerability that like somebody's pouring into something and like really wants it, like needs it to be good. Like I'm not there to waste anybody's time or anybody's money, you know, my money in that case. But yeah, it was great. There were those couple of moments where you were just like, you know, and I was like, wrong vibe, wrong vibe. Tell me what you need to tell me, but I'm going to just stay in my moment. And you were just like, you good?
Well,
And I'm just like, yeah. And it was
it's
fine. It was just funny.
it's interesting because I feel like when I act, especially because I'm often on sets where I'm directing,
Mm,
I never ever get any sort of validation. Like no
yeah.
one ever looks at me and goes, "Wow, that was really great." Like I never ever get that.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was on other sets and I was like acting, even if it was really good and people were like, "Oh my gosh, you were great." Even when I won an award, I never ever got any validation on set. And so when I'm on projects with people, I like try to overly validate them. Like, and like,
Sure.
honestly, it's just like me being real. Like, I just get
Yeah.
excited
You're
about
just excited.
directing, I'm in it, but like, I think actors are told, and like I had an acting teacher that was like, it's wrong to do it for the validation. It's wrong to like expect praise, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah, we're
What are
humans.
what are we doing it for then?
Yeah.
Like
And
that was
also like,
I, I like totally get it.
yeah.
I totally like, the artistic experience and life and like you're supposed to love the process. I think I love the process, but we are creating art so that other people can see it. Why
Right.
wouldn't you also validate each other while you're making the thing? Like,
Right. And it's not fair, like, it's, I mean, it's like that, it's that conversation of like not linking your happiness or your peace to like external sources. It's that, I
mm,
think that the bulk, the root of the conversation. But it's not fair to make yourself feel bad, or to like for somebody else to chastise or judge the need for that, because it's a real need. Like, we're human beings doing a
yep,
job in a moment, and we're still humans. Babies learn when you validate, like that's how humans learn anything. You get validated at school by gold stupid stars on the little board when you do the right. Like, that's how we've set up our whole world, is based on validation. And it's like not fair to be like, you shouldn't. And I know for me, I'm like, I don't want to do that, but I know that I do, and I forgive myself. So
yeah. And it's
like,
like sometimes you just need somebody to be like, wow, that's great. There was
right.
this moment on when we just did Blacklight where I was looking around and I was like, no one can give me notes because I wrote this character.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, no one can give me notes and nobody can tell me I'm good because if I was doing it badly, they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And it was just such a like an eye-opening experience in some ways. Even though I had done it before, I was like, oh my gosh, like I really need people to be in my head so that if I'm doing it wrong, somebody can be like, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But
Or just
I
know
do
the
think
character more intimately so that you're protected in that way. So that, because I mean, there were moments on set where you'd look at me and be like, and I'd be like, I was,
you're like, what do I
my,
do?
well, part of it, it was like, I was trying to be really mindful about staying in my lane, not overstepping John specifically, and like out of respect, and then also not overwhelming you with information. But there were moments where I was just like, let me in, coach. Like, can I co-direct for a second? Because I see there's something. Can I just give her a bubble and like give her a thing, And I was just, not to speak ill of anybody, but like, it was just one of those, I was like, man, I'm learning a lot about the balance, the delicate balance of things. And like, as, somebody that works with you and like knows a little bit about how you work, and then like as an actor just being like, god damn it, there's so much that I want to like protect her with and give her. Just, you need 5 minutes, we're going to talk about the character for a second, because you made a choice that I think worked, but like there wasn't that validation, and nobody, you know what I mean, you weren't getting the feedback that it seemed like you needed in the moment. And that's, again, that's not as saying anything against anyone. It's just sometimes you don't get what you need in the way you need
Mm-hmm.
it, because not everybody can speak everybody's language all the time. It just, the world doesn't work that way. But as a director, you endeavor to be able to do that, at least with your actors and your crew. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it was just, that was a wild experience. I was like, whew, this is painful in some ways for me, just being like, okay, you're the producer and you see things and I need to handle that and craft services, but also
You
I'm
see what
very
it's like on the
invested.
other side. Very,
Yeah,
very difficult. Yeah.
yeah, for
It's
sure. And I
difficult to
never,
not be like, I can fix this.
right,
Because as a
right.
producer, you're like, I know all the other things.
Yeah.
I think that like on First Dance, the thing that I remember most predominantly is like as a director, like, you know, I knew that you felt that you could trust me with the vision and the visuals and all of that.
Hmm.
But when you were acting, I could see this like push and pull of like trusting me, trusting Billy to let go enough, and then also
Hmm.
trusting yourself
Yeah.
to be, and like I think like one of the greatest tools that at least I use as a director is instead of being like, okay, we need to get to the purest form of this emotion, I just add layers. I'm like, okay, we're
Hmm.
gonna add another layer. We're gonna add another layer to that.
Yeah.
And then we get to the complexity of the emotion. And then afterwards, I'm like, okay, now we're gonna put all of these feelings into a box because they're not yours. And you can put that box away now. You've already played the character. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of directors are like, okay, do you remember a time when you had a feeling and you're using their own emotions
Right. Yeah.
against
Sense
them?
memory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I really try not to. And so like the biggest hurdle that we had, especially on day one, I think, was that trust element of like getting you to trust yourself, getting Billy to not push too hard and trust you. And
Hmm.
it's funny because we weren't doing any stunts, and yet somehow I felt like what we were doing was significantly harder than most stunts because it happened internally, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it was just establishing, like I said before, I like, it's the language, it's like learning people's languages, and like there are
Hmm.
so many different methods, and like I've worked with so many directors that I don't think they have a good working knowledge of different acting techniques in general, so they're not 100% I feel uncertainty from them about what they're even asking their actors to do. They see directing and acting as separate jobs, and I've never seen them as separate jobs, and I know that's like
Hmm.
controversial, I guess, but like to me, I feel like you understanding one really supports the other in a
Hmm.
way that I haven't experienced a lot on sets. And so maybe that's just me and my weird expectations or whatever, but like I think, yeah, it was like, I remember us trying to find the rhythm of like who needs what and how do they need it. And, like it takes a lot to push me like too far because I just have this bank of like life that's fresh enough that I don't, that yeah, I live my life in a way that it does support my acting work, I think a lot, which it's for better or for worse. But, I think it was great because I knew that you were trying to be really considerate and like careful about that and also get the best work out of the both of us. And it
Well, I
seemed to
think
be the right balance between the three of us. It seemed to be the right balance because Billy and I are two very different actors. So,
yeah, you're drastically different. And like honestly, I see acting as, well, people push themselves to make emotions.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see acting as like being, and I think I said this on set, is like acting is like being a human loudly, is like it is the act of like letting go of everything and being willing to be, have an embarrassing moment in front of everybody.
Hmm.
And like having that let go of like, I am not trying to achieve anything. I'm just I'm letting this scene and this moment hold me, and whatever comes, comes.
Hmm.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of actors don't necessarily know how to do that because they're not necessarily trained in that way. Like if you
Right.
do Meisner or Stanislavski or like any of those, like, you learn the method, and then when you get on set, that method kind of disappears because every set is different. And
Right.
so then you're pushing yourself to achieve a outcome and to achieve, like, I've seen the scene in my head, I know how I'm supposed to be. I'm like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but the randomness, of doing the scene, of letting yourself go, of like being held in the moment, like, is very difficult. And I think as a director, like I really try to foster at least the safety of like you could do anything, you
Hmm.
know. That's
Hmm.
why I always add like, okay, we're gonna do a wild take, and
Yeah.
like I call it a wild take. You can do whatever you want, like anything, and have fun with it. And like if that is, screaming or crying or whatever that is, we're just gonna enjoy it and have
Yeah.
fun.
Hmm.
And that's always the best take. That wild take is always the best take. It's always the take we use,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's a really effective ask because then you can bank on the fact that there's enough like this is like the science of improvisation, right? Like there's so many social contracts and personal contracts that we sign, without realizing it, that it still creates this very specific set of parameters within which you can do a wild take in your mind. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
even when you offer that to actors on set, very rarely do I see people like really let go. Like there's some structure that they're bumping up against the whole time when they're making choices. And I think it's that friction and that resistance that is the magic. It's not complete utter freedom from everything, because the character probably doesn't have that. You know what I mean? I mean, it
yeah.
depends on what you're playing or who you're playing. But like, I think I love that when, like, you know, and I was excited that that falls in the, you know, realm of your philosophy too, like when you're directing actors to do that, like the wild take after you've gotten a good one, or you feel like you got something that's good or usable, or like the take that people wanted, and you know, you feel like everybody's happy, and then you go for that crazy one, and then it ends up being brilliant, because I think people are bumping up against their own walls and constructs, even though they're trying to completely like disregard all of that. You don't turn all of that off in your brain. You just don't. Like, you can't automatically disregard all of the things that have created the world within which you exist, whatever that means. So it's like, I feel like the magic is the friction and the heat and the resistance that you hit when you're trying to like do a wild take as an actor, but you still have those things that are very much present and exist, but you're like letting go of control of them for a minute, which is, I don't know, it's really fun and satisfying. And you don't get to do a lot in a small film market, because there's not a lot of, often it comes down to time, I think, a lot of the time, and comfortability and experience of the director. Like, I think a lot of directors are afraid of that, because they feel like it's not going to actually yield anything good. And then everybody's in such a rush or time crunch to get the shots that they need, that they sacrifice sometimes the quality of the acting, because you need to like bang through the shot list, or we have to get coverage of that before we go to lunch. And that's like that, I think, right in that is like one of the biggest things that one has to navigate if you're going to be an actor in a regional market in the indie film scene, is like, your best work, you might not have time to get to your best work, or the space, or things might not get figured out, the shot might not get dialed in, the director might not find the language yet, you might not land on it before you have to move on into the next take anyway. And like living with that, you know, knowing like that's the version of me that's immortalized as this character. Okay, I'm going to try again in the next scene and hope that things coalesce better or faster. And it's not always like that, but that's one of the things that for me, like growing up as an actor in this film community, has been like interesting. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
ever present thing, which is yeah, it's, it is what it is, you know, but
I
it's
mean,
not, it's
it
not
doesn't matter
bad. It's
how
not but
like how good I am in a scene. I always think I'm trash. I'm always leaving and I'm like, that was trash. I'm like calling
no.
people. I'm like, I know I need to work on my self-esteem. I know I'm very like I know that if I get on a set, I have a flow about the set and I can feel the set. And there's something
Mm,
about it, you
mm-hmm.
know? The
Yeah.
thing I love the most is acting. That's the thing I'm afraid of the most. So,
Mm,
like, we'll
yeah,
see. I don't
we'll
know.
see. You just got to do it more.
I know. We'll
Put
see.
your feet in the cold ocean and face your fear, or whatever, I don't know, but
Yeah. So then, do you have any questions for me when it comes to like being on set before we talk about post-production?
yeah. So Megan, how do you decide what kind of projects you work on when people come to you with their script? And how do you decide what kind of projects you want to work on, like if a project is for you or not? How much of that is balancing like personal desire, artistic desire with professional desire? And if somebody comes to you in a, like the way that I came to you with First Dance, how do you decide what role you think is the best role for you to fill? Because you could have done a lot of things on First Dance. I mean, obviously
Oh
I
yeah,
wanted you to do what you did, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
could have done a lot of things.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's interesting. I think the way I choose a film to work on is completely different nowadays than the way it used to be. It used to be that I would just get a script and I'd be like, okay, could I see this in my mind on the first page? And if I can't get past the first page, I won't do it. Like it's
Mm,
just like, is the script like, can I see it? Could I see these shots? And I think honestly, like it is as simple as that in some respects, or it used to be for me. I think nowadays it is if I want to see it as a movie, which is actually really funny because if I would like have never written First Dance. Like it's just
Mm,
not like anything that I would have written. I never ever thought I would do a monster movie. I like don't even really care about horror,
yeah.
especially like a period piece like the way we did it. Like it's just not the vibe that I would ever write for myself. But I
Hmm.
remember reading the script, especially also it being a romance. Like
Hmm.
I would never write a romance. And so I was reading it and I was like, man, I would not make this if I like originally had like I would never think of this, but man, I want to watch it, you
Yeah.
know? And I think it's like if I get the vibe, if I want to see it, because oftentimes I'll be like scrolling through Netflix, scrolling through, whatever streaming service, walking through whatever video store, and I just can't find what I want to watch because it's not made yet. And
Right.
there are like a million movies in my
I
mind
know.
that I'm like, oh, if I could just watch the movie that I haven't made yet, that would be so good.
That's
And
so
so
real. Oh, yeah.
yeah. And so, like, reading the script, I was like, man, this is the type of thing that I would watch if I was like at home in bed and it was a cozy fall day. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I just want my pumpkin spice latte. I don't want to watch this. And then I want to read a good book. It's like a guilty pleasure kind of like film. And that's why I jumped on it immediately because I was like, I know I can make this good. Like, I know that it's one of those things that like needs fostering. And also I think on a very personal level, coming from a quiet crowd where I dealt with so many things, like just like my film career was very difficult. I every time a woman want and like this is just like automatic in my mind. Anytime a woman's like, I wrote this and I want to act in it, what do I do? I'm like, oh, I'll co-direct for you. Even if I don't like the story, I'm like, I'll help you, you
Yeah.
know, because, because no one helped me. And so I just like, okay, I know exactly what you need. And the thing is you're not even going to know what you need because
Mm.
you haven't dealt with it yet. And
Sure.
that's the
Yeah.
problem is it's like you just don't even know what you need to be. And it's such a
Yeah.
unique space. Men get to direct and star in their own movies, and they do not deal with as much things as women do
Mm-mm.
because the crew is going to be fighting you already because
Right.
they already fight you as a female director, as a female actress. They're already looking at you like sideways,
Yeah.
as someone who
Totally.
wrote it, somebody who has all the power, who put them in the room. I
Right.
have literally been on sets where I literally am paying everybody. I have done all the set design. I'm acting in the thing. I wrote the thing. It's based off of a personal story. And people look at me and go, yeah, I don't know if that's how that would happen. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's based off a true story. I don't know what to tell you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think in some ways I like chose to be on First Dance and a few other projects since then, selfishly, because in a way of like the way that I heal myself there is by helping other women do it. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I feel healed by doing that because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful and joyous that they just get to live their dream and no one's like looking at them and going, like, are you sure you can do that? I'm like, of course you could do it. This will be easy,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But like projects since then, I really only now take projects again for movies I want to see, and generally that comes down to is the main female character complicated? Like
Hmm.
would I know this girl? Like is she a person? You
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And it's as simple as that. Like is she a person?
Yeah. Like a real human and not just the female lead. You
Not just the
always.
female lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I realized that, and this has only been this last year, where we've started Foxy Film, but before that, I was feeling really like dragged down by the film industry and really exhausted. And feeling frustrated. And I had a friend of mine and I was like complaining, about being a producer because I've made my name as a producer in
Mhm.
Portland film. And he was like, yeah, I don't want to be a kingmaker for assholes anymore. And I was like, oh wow, that's such a sublime term. Like,
Yeah.
am I am I a kingmaker for assholes?
Yeah.
I think I am. I've produced a lot of films for a lot of directors who are really terrible and who
Mhm.
I've deemed as being unethical. And I think half of the point of me producing those films for them is that as the producer, I'm the person on set that gets to protect everybody and gets
Right.
to make sure that like the set is set up, that like we are at a good location, we have bathrooms, all these things. And that's one of the main reasons why I've been willing to jump on projects is because I've deemed the director as being not necessarily a safe person, but I can protect the crew.
Yeah.
And this last year, I'm like, he can't even make his movie if I'm not there. So now I just don't even make the movie.
Right.
I'm like, I don't need to make your movie.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you just went out.
I'm back.
Oh,
Can you see
yeah.
me? Okay.
Yeah, I can see
Okay. Sorry.
you. Okay, so then like with post-production, what's it been like the last year? Like I know we kind of edited it together
Yeah.
and like kind of talked about the form of the film and all of that. And then we've gone on a journey to like
Mm.
figure out what to do with this movie. What has that been like for you?
It's been really strange, honestly. Like, I knew that I was not making a movie to be popular in Portland film. I knew that it would be received weird because it's not what people are wanting in this film community. And I did not give a shit about that from the beginning. Like, truly from the bottom of my heart, I was like, I'm prepared for this to, no, really, because like,
Like truly from the bottom of my heart, I don't
don't
care.
fucking care. But like, and I mean that in the most sincere, real way. Like, and I'm not even saying it to be mean or anything, but I had to sit down again. It was one of the many conversations that I had with myself in the beginning of the process when it was real. Like when I had gotten the grant and I was like, how much of my own money do I like making the budget, and everything felt like real because it was really moving forward and the crew was assembling and you were on board and Damien was on board and everything, blah, blah, blah. I was like, David, this film, people are not, first of all, people, this is not for people in Portland. I don't think people here are going to get it necessarily unless they have, just because I am so much a minority here, like more than in other cities of this size. And um it is it shouldn't be something that you have experienced personally in your life to be good. Like, it shouldn't, that those should not be the same. They don't, it shouldn't depend on that in order for people to see the value in it. But I also knew that um I'm not making something that I knew was going to be popular or exciting to people because it is such a different genre. I knew that it was a picture of something that I felt spoke to like a world beyond Portland, and that's fine. And that generally seems to be like, a lot of the response is a lot of people that have, the few people that have seen it are like, this seems like a bigger conversation than what it is. And I appreciate that about it. So I'm like, that's great. So it's been, I say all that, prefaced all this to say, like, I didn't know going into the film festival circuit, like that was the decision that we had made. I know I sat down and talked with you about like, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to do a premiere? At first I was like, yeah, let's do a premiere. And then I was like, well, I don't know the rules about film festivals as much. So that took some research on my part to like, to understand it for me, like what those rules and the regulations are. Can you submit it to places when it's already done a premiere, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know. And I'd been told a lot of things, but I wasn't sure for myself what all of that meant. So I decided to go the route of the film festival because I needed the experience of doing that anyway, So I was like, if this is something, I don't want the film festival thing to be off the table completely in the future. So I feel like this is a great time to try that out with the film that I just made, that I feel really proud of, that I feel is like solid. And so that's what we've been doing. And so it's been a weird journey. I've learned a lot about film festivals in the last like 8 months. And it's not like everything that I thought it was. And I've heard a lot of people's very strong opinions about it. And I'm seeing where some of that might be rooted in like things that are factual now for me based on my experience, or things that feel not factual. um, and I think the film festival experience to me highlights the value of like connections. I think a lot of it has to do with, and this was communicated to me before we like embarked on this, is like it really is helpful to know people, or to have people vouch for you or vet you or whatever. It's really helpful to be in certain circuits. And I'm not saying that I think that that completely determines your success, but this is another experience that has reiterated that for me, like the importance of connections. I have no connections to any of the film festivals that I've submitted the film to. And then it got accepted into one, and that was exciting. And it was an interesting experience. And we weren't, we couldn't go to it. So that was kind of like, people are like, if you submit it, you need to be, this was what somebody told me. They were like, whatever film festivals you submit to, you better be prepared to actually show up. And I was just like, oh.
Like all over the world?
Yeah. They were like, you have no business submitting to film festivals unless you can actually show up there. And I was like,
who said this?
I don't I won't say, just in case they'll know. If they see this. I'm not, but I won't like call them out. But I actually had 2 people say that to me, and I was like, okay, sure, I'll just use my 10 grand to fly me and Megean wherever, like that's a whole, but I was like, oh, I get it. Also, like, people budget in post. This is part of the budgeting in post. I understand that now. Totally. I didn't know what the expense would be like. I wasn't aware. And then I learned, and I'm continuing to learn every time I submit it and see what it costs, like the real cost of it. But overall, it's not the experience that I thought it would be, but I'm glad to have had the experience to say that I've done it, because now I know, and I can give that information to other people if they want to know my opinion or my experience, if that's helpful to other, filmmakers at the beginning of their narrative filmmaking career. But I think part of I think it's left me with more questions than answers, which I'm excited to try to figure out, but I don't know if it's always the right route for every film. And I think that is the biggest takeaway, is like the insight of like, oh, it's not the only way that you can go after through, with your film in post. It's not the only route, and it might not be the best route for whatever your film is. And that, I think, is the lesson that I've learned throughout the year, is like, there are other ways. And also it's like opened my eyes. I've done research, because I this is a question that I want answered. Like, what is the best route for this film? Like, that's pertinent right now, like, and it's led me to find other avenues. I think the conversation around short films is that like, you don't really make money on short films. Of course, like there's not a way, but there are distribution services, or there are streaming platforms that just specialize in short films, and they just want to highlight short films, and they will pay you. And I did not know that until very recently. So that's a cool thing that I've discovered because of being on this journey and trying to navigate the film festival world. Yeah. So like, I don't know. It's like I said, it's brought up more questions than answers for me, really. But like the main, like I said, takeaway is like, it's okay to question whether or not this is the right path for your particular project at this particular time.
Yeah, it's really
So,
interesting because like being on the other end of a few projects at this point, and really deeply like looking into, like you start film and everyone's like, "Oh, this is what you do."
right.
Like
Yeah.
you make a movie or you get it pre-funded, you do the thing, you get distributed, and then you put it out. Or you go through the film festival route, a producer picks you up, and then you get it distributed and you put it out. And it's like this, but like the industry is completely changing. And at every single level, I have asked these same questions on
Mm-hmm.
every single project.
Mm.
Going into meetings with film distributors, talking with lawyers, like doing the film festival route, like asking other filmmakers. And like the truth is that every single project's different. And
Mm-hmm.
you kind of don't know even what project you have until you've picked one of them and gone ahead,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Um, I felt like because of the conversations with First Dance, that it would be a really great, you know, film festival route for this particular project. And I don't think necessarily it's been unsuccessful, but at the same time, like I realized part of the problem is that people don't understand multiracial relationships. I
Sure.
think the film is really beautiful, but every conversation I had with somebody, they didn't actually understand the conversation, and it would have been different if we had cast a white man,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
which I felt like was like, so then where is the platform that people who get it, like people who would understand that,
Yeah.
conversation, where's the platform that we put it in? And like I couldn't find the platform. I'm like doing this deep research. I was just like, oh, it doesn't exist yet. Like
Right.
some of these things are just so new,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
It, I just think there's no one way to make a movie. And while it does seem like there is one way to distribute, there really isn't. It's all completely changing. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
Tubi just surpassed other streaming platforms.
Oh,
Tubi,
really?
yeah, you can get your film on Tubi for like nothing, and it's
Hmm.
surpassing Netflix.
Oh, wow.
Like all these
Yeah.
things are completely changing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think, yeah, that was one of the things, like, I knew that it is such a nuance. I think a lot of everything boils down to also like the momentum behind something. And I knew I wasn't going to have like a bunch of people in Portland, like, yeah, I get it. And I was super, like it wasn't going to make sense to people here in the community that I'm in. So it was risky in that way, but like also it's real life. So like, so what, you know what I mean? So like, I knew going into it, I was like, very like, it could be this and it could be received like this and it could be received like that, and these are two very different things, and let's find out what happens. And like, so I'm not necessarily like, I don't know what I'm feeling about it really, like, but I mean, it'll get entered into one more film festival, and then I've completed my experience with it, because financially I'm not interested in investing in any more money into that at all.
so
um
here's my question for you really quick.
mhm,
What now it's done and you have seen it yourself.
yeah.
Do you like it?
The
Like,
film.
yeah, the film. Like, would you sit down on like a nice little October day with your pumpkin spice latte and watch it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like it. I think there's a level of like criticism that comes from me with any project that I do, where I feel like I wish I had, obviously, if I had $5,000 more, the film would look very different. You know what I mean? Like, of course. So that exists simultaneously with like the rational brain being like, but you didn't have that much money, so don't worry about, discard that. Like, you just save that for your next project mentally with what you want. If you had a budget of 10 grand, then that's what that can look like. Okay, you know that now because you have proof of what something can be with that budget. So, or with the half of that budget. So I think there's part of me that has that. And I like that. That's just part of my experience experiencing my work. Like, I'm always going to be pretty critical of it. But I think what it does for me is like, the tone is like really important with things, and I feel like the tone of it is really consistent, and like there's a feeling and a vibe that is conveyed through the shots and through the costume and through the dialogue and through the, like, the style of it all. And that for me was the most important thing to like come across, and I feel like it puts me in a mood when I watch it, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. You know what I mean?
It's a
Like,
vibe.
it's a vibe. Yeah. And I feel like it's
Yeah.
so funny to say that we're like millennial girl. Like, it's a vibe.
No,
But
it's
like,
it's a
it's
vibe.
important. Like, it is speaking to the energetics of something. Like, that's what vibes are. It's like the energy around something. We're just like, describe it in that way. And I feel like it energetically puts me in a very specific place and makes me think about things. And that was honestly the feedback that I got from some people. They were just like, I just was thinking so much after I watched it. Like I was thinking about myself and my life, and I was like unpacking my emotions, and I was like emotional. And so I was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted you to come away from the experience with. So because I think that makes people watch it more than once too. And that was like, you can watch something cool and you're like, that was cool. And then that's it. That's the end of it. You disengage and you move on with your life. And that's fine. I love that. For some things, that's what I want. Like I need something that I can just turn off my brain, watch it, and then I'm over. It's the moment's over and I walk away and it's like it never happened kind of. But like the films that I think are the most important to me, that I enjoy the most, both short and feature length, are the ones that give me are a vibe, and they leave me with a feeling, and they leave me in a mood, and they leave me wanting to listen to a certain kind of music. And like my fashion maybe is like influenced by it a little bit for a couple of days. And like,
Oh yeah.
like I smell certain smells when I think about it, and I like feel certain colors when I think about it. Like it feels like an experience in that way, and that's exactly what I wanted it to be. Do I feel like I wish I had more time with a couple of the scenes, like mentally, not time, literal time, but like to like find something slightly deeper or different emotionally? Yes. Do I feel like I wanted to be able to facilitate Billy to find something deeper emotionally in some of the scenes? Definitely yes. Do I feel like, given all of that, it like still reads well and tells the story well? Yes. So
Mm.
ultimately, like, yeah, I like it. Like it is sometimes hard for me to watch my work. Like I'm just getting used to watching myself dance, like, and I've been dancing professionally like my whole life also. Like slightly less time than I've been acting, but um um yeah, so like after this I'm like, yeah, I could go watch it, and I like want to, you know what I mean? Like I want to, so like
Yeah.
I like the whole process of First Dance has really been an exercise for me in like really standing behind something, even if it's imperfect, because the act of standing behind it is more important than like the perfection of the final product anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and like it is something that I can stand behind and be like, here's my work. Like I would show that to any producer or whatever, distributor, blah, 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 blah. Like
Yeah.
I believe in it enough to do that, and I'm not like embarrassed by it or something. You know what I mean? Like I do believe in it, and I do think it looks really good, and I do think that it sets out, it does what I wanted it to do, which is like everything I just said. So yeah, yeah.
You're like in short. Yeah.
In short, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it's important that we like can do that for ourselves after we've like made something, like even if it's not perfect, like it deserves me standing behind it because I made it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it deserves that, and everybody that worked on it deserves that from me as well. Even if they're like, oh, people can feel however they feel, but like at the end of the day, it was my money. You know what I mean? It was my project, it was my idea, it was my story, it was my thing. So like I owe it, and I owe everybody that like came on and poured themselves into it for those 3 days to like stand behind it, and like not just because of that, but also because I do think it's good. So,
Yeah.
yeah. How do you feel
I
about
like
it?
I like it. Every time
Yeah.
I like pull it up, I'm like, I really like this. And I think it's good.
Yeah.
Like I think that like for somebody who, like I'm the type of person where I watch things and I like critically take them apart.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, oh, I know where that light is. Okay, like I wish that actor would have done this. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like it's like every single thing I watch, even things that are like multi-billion-dollar productions,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I actually really love the end product, and I really love like the film.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really have any notes. I think because it is a vibe and because it is emotional and because it does achieve like what the original script, like sought out. I think that the people that I've shown it to immediately are like, "Oh my gosh," like flabbergasted. And honestly, I sent it to my mom who says she doesn't like anything I ever do. Like she's just anti everything. But I sent it to her and she was crying and she was like, "Oh my gosh, that is so good." And she immediately got it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that to me is like, okay, that's your audience right there, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, she
I,
gets it. Obviously, personal to her. Like,
yeah,
you're
I mean, like,
you. She knows what it's like to be in that, that kind of a
she's a
situation. So,
Mexican woman in a relationship with a white man. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like she immediately understood what the story was about. She immediately got it. She loved it. And I just think that, you know, I think there's an audience for every movie.
hmm,
And I think that also a movie, like creating something, anything, doesn't, you don't have to think about the audience all the time. I
right,
think when we sit, I think it's important on a business perspective to be like, okay, I'm making this film for this audience, and like, you do all your due diligence. But at the end of the day, I think that it is important sometimes to just make things for yourself and
yeah,
to just follow the journey and to just love the journey and
right.
love the process, because otherwise, what are you doing it for?
Why? Yeah,
Yeah, like why? Like you don't even know those people, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So I am very proud of the project and I'm excited to like, we're thinking about a streaming platform. We're thinking about some other things. I'm excited to like follow it through and like any other films that we do. And I stand by it.
yeah.
Like I didn't even question it. I was just like everybody else sucks.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't
I
feel
thought it was
like
like
the response was negative necessarily. I knew from the beginning that um well, my goal, this is like a bigger conversation, I guess I'll truncate it, but like, I knew from the beginning that there was nothing about this script or the style of the film that was going to speak to this art, like this local Portland film audience necessarily, for a lot of different reasons. But I knew that what I was talking about was really powerful and also very real and told in this way that I think is cool, like through the lens of like light sci-fi, light fantasy element, which I think is fun and interesting to watch. Um, and so I knew that the momentum of everybody around us being swept up in like how fucking cool it is was not going to be there. And so I knew that from the moment I finished it. I was like, this is not a strategic move for you in the way that you could make a film.
but isn't that so valuable? You
Hmm.
know? That is
Yeah.
such a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I'm proud of myself for just being like, stay the course, kid. Like you just got to go forward. Like that people aren't going to be like, the people that it affects are going to really, really, really appreciate this, I think. And I knew that the whole way through, and it continues to be that the people that watch it, like everybody that I've showed it to is just like, oh my God. Like, they're just like, Jesus, like, wow, yeah, wait, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. Great. Yes. Think about it, like have your feelings about it. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, we should wrap up because we've been talking for so long. Um,
yeah,
but do you want to do the final outro?
yeah, I do.
I'm gonna pick.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm gonna pick what are you doing?
I picked you. You're
Oh,
doing the final outro.
I
It's
thought you
now
were
it's all you.
picking it. Oh, well, friends, this has been Bevin and Megan talking about film, talking about politics, talking about crazy cool medallions. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't talk about either of those things, but we did talk about film. Talked about First Dance, showed a lot of insight, showed a lot of heart. You know, at the end of the day, we're all just storytellers trying to tell our stories out here in the world. We out here. But anyways, this has been Foxy Film Collective. Thanks for joining us on our talk today about First Dance, short film by me and Megan. We're going to catch you next time when we talk about some more cool stuff, share some more insights on film, crazy stories on set. Who knows? Anyways, we'll be back soon. Thanks for tuning